even say why.
Why?
Why? Leaving me lonely still. I Am I Said there by who?
One Mr. Neil Diamond.
Diamonds. I Am I Said. Are you kidding me? I sing that song every time I play out. I don't know if the audience knows that I'm a one-man band. I play guitar and sing oldies but goodies, and that's certainly one of those. I do several Neil Diamond songs, in fact, but I know that song was chosen by our producer Cindy because it has to do with personhoods. Personhood.
Yeah.
I said. Now, it's interesting you mentioned that because I wanted to mention that mysterious word, the most mysterious word in the English language, is the word I.
I think we take that for granted.
And I don't mean I as in E-Y-E, I mean the word I as in the letter I. Isn't that why don't you want to elaborate on that first?
Well, I know from our prior conversations off the radio that
Yes.
you could probably fill up a whole show just on the notion of I.
Yes. Right, it just seems like I denotes personhood. I mean, what other word could denote personhood than referring to oneself as I? And what's interesting is if you look at the things that we say relating to that word, there's usually possessor and possession. I have an arm. I have a leg. I have a thought. I ran. So there's things that I does, right? I do things. I will things. I choose things. The mysterious question is, with all of that, what is the I that has, and the I that chooses, and the I that thinks? What is that mysterious I, Mr. John? Don't give me that face. Give me a good answer. How would you describe I?
I am happy to be here. I will say this. I have not given near so much thought to the notion of I as you have.
Well, I didn't want to go into a whole diatribe about that tonight, but I do distinguish, in my mind at least, between I and self. Self is what we, in a sense, the I seems to control. I almost hesitate to say possess, because then that would make the body as a thing, and I don't think the body is a thing, because I believe that in body soul composite hylomorphism. But when we say I have an arm or I have a leg, we are making a distinction between I and leg, I and body.
Yes.
We even can say, and this is the most mysterious thing, we can even say I have a soul.
Yeah.
What the heck would that? How do you distinguish between I that has and soul which is had? Which makes me think that perhaps what we mean by I and soul are actually distinct from each other. The soul is the form of the body. Perhaps I is the consciousness of the body.
I would have to say that the I is the entire being.
I don't know about that.
Yes, I have a soul, I have an arm, I have a leg, I have a mind. All those are unified by one word, I, and yet that one I has many aspects.
I choose.
Yes. I have will, I have intellect.
So you're saying that my leg, my big toe chooses when I say I choose?
No, it's the person that chooses. I mean, there's an aspect of the person, there's the will that chooses.
But it's I that uses the will.
Yes.
Or utilizes the will to choose.
I stubbed my toe.
Yeah.
I chose to eat the apple pie.
Yes. So, and when I refer to I and when you refer to I, obviously are two different things. Even though they are the same nature, they are two different things. There's John I and there's Paul I.
Yes, which is fascinating. And what's even more fascinating is that how that one I happens within a common humanity.
Yes, there are.
We have a common nature.
Almost 7 billion eyes on the world right now.
Oh, you're like my 42nd cousin.
And we are all descended from. Even science would say that around 120,000 years ago, we are all descendants of two original human beings.
Yeah.
To which the entire world are descendants of. But anyway, getting back to this notion of personhood and what we call ourselves. We are persons inasmuch as we are subjects with intellect and will. Just to cover what we talked about a little bit, to go over it before the break. Persons aren't necessarily physical, so there are angelic persons, there are human persons, and there are God persons. Now, God persons, obviously, if you're a believer in God, are uncreated, are infinite and eternal, and are perfect. All persons that are created persons, whether they be human persons or angelic persons, are simply reflections of the eternal Creator Himself.
Yeah, I would agree. In the way that if you were to look at a Norman Rockwell painting, you would say, well, that's a reflection of the talent of the person, Norman Rockwell, the artist.
Yes.
So in this way that God is like the artist and we're the creation, and we bear some imprint of the Creator.
And here is part of the mystery I was talking about earlier. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, the only time where somebody asks God what His name is. God, and of course in ancient times the name actually described the being. God simply said, I am.
Yeah,
there's the mysterious I.
Yes, isn't that fascinating? That two words could convey so much.
Yeah, and if you think about it, all created persons have to say I am and then fill in the blank.
Right.
To describe what we are. I am short, I am tall, I am Paul, I am John, I am dark-haired, I am Italian, I am Irish, I am female, I am male, etc. I am smart, I am dumb. There's a whole slew of adjectives that one would have to understand to know the person, because we're all different from each other in that respect.
Right.
But with God and the name that He actually gave Himself, the divine name,
He's simply being itself.
There is nothing after the word am.
Right.
He is personal being, infinite and eternal, without definition.
Yeah.
Without boundary.
And so I would say with that, if God is perfect being, the perfect I, and has perfect personhood, then all of the persons that come from that perfection would actually be only analogous to the perfect personhood, the perfect being of God Himself.
Right. It's sort of like if you were to paint a beautiful painting, you would say that those persons in that painting are analogous to the living, breathing human beings that are here.
That's right.
On this side of the painting. And yet, you could still call them persons, even though they're not really like us, but they are in a sense.
Oh, there's a portrait of Uncle Bob. There's Uncle Bob over there, but it's not the fullness of Uncle Bob.
Reflection. Okay. So, are animals persons? We talked about God is the uncreated, infinite and eternal, tri-personal being, which with no definition and no boundaries. We talked about angelic persons that are pure spirit, with no bodies, and they're pure intellects. We talked about human persons, which have both physical and spiritual components to them, i.e. a body-soul composite. And so that we're physical persons. Are animals persons?
They are not.
They're not persons.
They are not. Although they may have some person-like characteristics.
Person-like characteristics.
Yes. For example, if anyone's owned a pet like a dog or had multiple dogs, they know that they would say that dogs have quote-unquote personalities.
Yes.
So there's certain aspects of their being that are different than other dogs.
Really should be called dogalities.
Yeah, dogalities, right? Or catalities.
Or
animalities. But they don't have intellect the way that we do, right? There's limits to it. They have a certain mode of communication. We know that various species do. We can see that. Even some species have been very fascinating, like how elephants will mourn their own dead, which is kind of fascinating itself. But they don't have intellect and the will in the way that persons do. They don't have that immortal soul the way persons do.
How do we know?
How do we know?
Yeah, how do we know? Every time I say this, I get in trouble especially by the human sex that isn't male?
Yeah. Well, there's some males too that will argue that.
They would argue it, but they're not as
they're not
emotionally,
providing. Yeah, they're
involved,
not,
it seems.
and they're not giving very good evidence either.
Yeah. So that animals they're certainly physical beings. Would you say then, just to make it simple for radio's sake,
Sure.
you have angels that are spirits without bodies.
Yeah.
You have animals that are bodies without spirits, and you have humans that are sort of the bridge between both heaven and earth.
Kinda, yeah.
Spiritual and bodily.
I like that old definition of a human person. What does it Socrates say? A man is a rational animal.
Aristotle, yeah.
Yeah, Aristotle.
Yeah. A rational animal. So that we have, obviously, we have an animal component.
Yeah.
We're animated bodies, and yet there's something rational and there's something spiritual within us that virtually any philosopher can see, or
Yeah.
any thinking person.
And yeah, just even someone of a very regular common sense intellect, they'll see and they'll intuitively
let me write
know
down
it.
some of the things here that I have. Let me talk about some of the things here that I have written down about just some of the general differences, the essential differences between animals and human persons. Speech. Animals have signatory cries and gestures, whereas humans have propositional language. Now,
Do you want me to give you a signatory?
yes, go ahead. There you go. Now that is a dog signifying what?
I'm hungry.
Okay. And that's just it. Animals do give signs in their signatory gestures, but humans, in a sense, do too. Like when the stomach growls, it means it points to, it's a sign. It points to the fact that I may be hungry, right?
Yes.
Or when I have a smile on my face, it points to, it's a sign that I might be happy. Or if you hear a woman screaming or a man screaming, it could be a sign, it probably is, that they're afraid of something. So we also have signatory gestures, but we have symbolic propositional language that rises way above the physiological gestures like other animals have.
Yeah, it does. It is kind of fascinating. Language, also the ability to create things. So, we're not talking about like a bird might build a nest, but that's instinctive. That species of bird always builds the same type of nest in the same type of place, generally speaking. Whereas you get a human can build all sorts of different homes in various places of various shapes and sizes.
Right? We have igloos, we have teepees.
Yes.
We have Trump towers.
Yes.
We have all kinds of different
made of
homes.
different materials.
Made of different materials. So in other words, a bird can't say, "Hey, let's be creative and do something totally creative, different than what this nest looks like."
I want to build a Gothic-style birdhouse.
Yeah. It just doesn't happen. Birds don't have that creativity because they have nothing spiritual inside of them that rises above their physiological instincts.
That's right. I would agree.
All right. So knowledge, generally speaking, animals is sensual and instinctual, and ours is sensual and intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, we still have instinct too,
Yeah.
but we have if we allow it, our intellect can actually govern our lower passions and our appetites.
And that's what it's meant to do.
That's right.
That's the proper order.
And if it doesn't, well, then people might say, "Oh, don't be such a monkey." Then you're being less of who you are.
Yeah, you're acting
by
like
your
an
nature.
animal.
Yeah.
If you allow your lower nature, your passions, and even your emotions get the best of you and govern you, rather than what you understand in your intellect to know to be true and good, then of course you're acting less like a human and more like an animal.
Yeah.
So we have that that intellectual, spiritual part of us that rises above the physiological instincts, and we can just give it an example. If you're an animal and you're extremely hungry, you haven't eaten in a while, and there is this rabbit, and you're a carnivore, that's going by you. He's pretty defenseless. You're not going to sit there and deliberate and say, is this the morally right thing to do?
No, I'm going to crouch down behind the tall grass, and I'm going to sneak up on the rabbit, and I'm going to try and catch it and eat it.
A very hungry dog doesn't say, wait a minute, my master's going to feed me in about a half hour, and I'll just leave that little guy alone. I'm sure that his parents...
Only the most well-trained dog.
No. So, yeah, we have the ability to rise above our physiological instincts, and this is what makes us human. We have intellect and free will. And that's why it's free, right?
Yes.
We don't have to follow our lower base nature.
Yeah, we can choose.
Yeah, we have the ability. And this is, of course, what the moral life is all about. This is a fascinating one between us and other animals. Our relation to time and space. Our relation to time, well, animals' relation to time, let's start with them. It's confined to the perceptual presence. Think about that. An animal's conception of time is confined to the perceptual presence, whereas ours, we have the ability to mentally transcend the perceived presence. In other words, you and I realize that we had a past, we will have a future, and we're sort of on this particular mark right here in the ruler of our lives. We know that.
That is kind of fascinating.
Isn't it?
Animals are just there.
They're just there and they live in the presence, and that's all they are aware of is the consistent presence. I mean, you don't. In other words, you can hear the music. The video can't hear the music, but you and I can with the headphones on. So we need to take a break, but I want to explore this a little more, the difference between, and I want to get into the perceptual here and now too, versus what we have as humans, having a human soul. 978-454-4980 is our phone number, the BTS hotline. If you want to get involved in our conversation, love to have you. You're listening to Beneath the Surface at WCAP. Paul Morano with my guest, Mr. John Chuteris, and Cindy behind the glass, and of course, Jen, who is doing the video. We'll be right back right after this.